With this Guitar Lessons for Beginners video, we'll show you how to apply basic fingerstyle or fingerpicking technique to basic major chords. We'll also show you how to work on improving your chord transitions or switching chords within chord progressions. With guitar tabs and chord diagrams, we'll cover it all with the step-by-step approach. Now, the first step with learning fingerstyle technique is to know what the bass notes are for each chord. And if you already know your basic major chords, how to play them, it's pretty simple because whatever the total amount of strings are in the chord, that number is going to be your bass note. So for example, a G chord where you play 6 strings, the bass note will be the 6th string. For a C chord, 5 strings, bass note will be the 5th. D chord, 4 strings, bass note is that open 4th string. To get a little bit more technical on this, applying some guitar logic, another way to look at bass notes is that the bass note, at least for basic chords, will be the same letter name as the chord itself. So if we go back to G, that bottom string, that 6th string, we're fretting it on the 3rd fret. Well, that 6th string 3rd fret is actually a G note. If we were to count up the bottom string, E, F, F sharp, G. So you can apply some guitar logic here with bass notes. A G chord, the bass note is G. We just sort of proved it there, but you don't have to calculate it. If I just were to ask, what's the bass note for G chord, a basic one, you just can rattle off G. Let's go to C for another example. Again, that 5th string's the bass note. What's the bass note for a C chord? C. And if we had to prove it, that 5th string, well, A, A sharp, B, and C. And then finally with D, bass note D, and the proof is with that 4th open string, a D note. Now we'll focus on the fingers with basic fingerstyle technique, and with the 1, 2, and 3 fingers, you align and assign those fingers to pluck certain strings. The 1 finger is assigned to the 3rd string. The 2 finger, the middle finger, is assigned to the 2nd string, and the 3rd finger is assigned to the 1 or the top string. And with that, you keep your the plucking hand or the strumming hand, depending what you're doing, steady in position by using the correct fingers. So let's apply some basic fingerstyle technique to a G chord. Let's start to put things together. So with the G, first step is, what is the bass note? That is the bottom string. We'll pluck that with the thumb. And then with the fingers, we'll pluck the 1 finger plucks the 3rd string, middle finger plucks the 2nd string, 3rd finger plucks the top string. Now that's just starting off with a 4-note run. But what we're going to do is actually play a 6-note run here. And here's the fingerstyle pattern for what we're going to do on G. Those first 4 notes, and then we go down the strings. Now if you look at the example on the screen, that's how it's going to look in writing. It's a little bit more confusing to look at it in writing than just to sort of copy what you see here, but if you do note on that first note, it's the 3rd fret on the 6th string, and the T indicates the thumb is plucking it. And then for the G chord, we have open strings. So that 3rd string is open, 2nd string is open, top string is the 3rd fret, and then the open strings. And that's the basic fingerstyle pattern that we're going to focus on for this lesson. So let's do that G chord one more time. And now let's play it 4 in a row. 1, 2, ready, go. Now you can apply this same fingerstyle technique or pattern to other chords. Your fingers are always going to be assigned to the top 3 strings, so the only real difference will be the bass note for each chord. That's the note we pluck with the thumb. C chord, for example, the bass note is the 5th string. So with that, that's our bass, and then the same pattern we can apply to the top 3 strings. Of course, we're fretting different notes, so it's going to sound different. And now let's fine-tune that. Let's do 4 in a row of a C chord. 1, 2, ready, go. For the D chord, the bass note is the 4th string, so the thumb will shift to the 4th string, and here's how a D chord will sound. And let's do 4 in a row of D. 1, 2, ready, go. For a basic open E major chord, you play all 6 strings just like we do for G. But because we're fretting different notes, we have, even though we're still plucking that bottom string, it's a different bass note. It's now the open 6th string. With G, it was the 3rd fret. The open 6th string is E. It's an E bass note for an E chord. And same pattern applies to E. So let's do E4 in a row. 1, 2, ready, go. Now after 4 chords, you should have the idea on how to apply fingerstyle technique to other chords. So we're going to do an A major chord next, but if you want to teach yourself right now or attempt to apply this basic fingerstyle pattern to an A chord, you can pause the video, and what we'll do is after you pause it, we'll show you how to do it. So if you want to do it on your own, by all means, try it right now and pause the video. Otherwise, here we go. Here's how to fingerpick an A chord, which is 5 total strings. So bass note's the 5th string, and it'll sound like this. And let's do 4 in a row with A. 1, 2, ready, go. Now the next step is to do something a little bit more musical sounding with this basic fingerstyle progression. And we're going to take this pattern and make an arrangement or a chord progression of it that sounds sort of like a mini song. And so we're going to focus just on the G, C, and D chords. And so we're going to call this the G, C, D progression. And it's a great setup to actually start to learning other songs. You're not going to jump into Stairway to Heaven or Dust in the Wind right now, but this GCD progression is the next step. And the good news is, since you already have the fingerstyle pattern down, if you're looking at the screen, we don't need to use guitar tablature at all, because if you know the basic technique, all you need to use are chord symbols and know how many times to fingerpick each chord. And so we have the complete progression here. But what we're going to do is break it off into sections. And so section 1 of the GCD progression will be G 4 times, C twice, and then back to G 2 times. Here's a quick run through on how it'll sound. We'll walk through it slowly. So if you want to play along, it's G 4 times, C 2 times, and then back to G 2 times. 1, 2, ready, go. Now, depending on the student, that might be a little bit of a challenge. So what we're going to do is give you a couple pointers on how to work on these transitions. The key number one, a lot of people tend to start off a little fast. You don't want to do that because then your changes, especially if you're a beginner, tend to stand out a bit more because your changes will be slow. The arpeggios themselves might not be too challenging. But to focus on the chord changes, especially if you're a beginner, what helps with the transitions are to focus on one finger at a time when you're switching. So our switch here with this section is G to C. So if you focus on one finger and you look at where that finger goes between each chord, then you break it down with each finger, it makes it easier. Here's what I mean. Let's focus on the third finger for G. That's on the top string 3rd fret. When you go to C, the bass note for a C chord, you're going to be using that 3rd finger. In fact, you need to prioritize getting to that bass note first. So when you go from G to C, don't worry about getting that first finger there because we're going to play that string later, the 2nd string. You need to say to yourself, okay, what's the bass note for C? The 3rd finger's there, so you do something like this. Focus on that 3rd finger and then place the other fingers down to follow suit. And if you do that a couple times, you build up a good muscle memory so it becomes a little bit more automatic, hence leading to quicker chord changes. So another way to look at it, if we look at the 1 finger, that goes to the 2nd string 1st fret. And then the middle finger does a little shift to the 4th string 2nd fret. But I would say the key is that 3rd finger because we want to get to the bass notes quick and just have the fingers go down as we're playing the arpeggio. So with that in mind, let's do that first section again of the GCD progression. And here we go. 1, 2, ready, go. Section 2 of the progression will be D 2 times, C 2 times, then repeating that, another 2 Ds and another 2 Cs. So let's apply that fingerstyle technique to section 2, the GCD progression. 1, 2, ready, go. Section 3 is the final section. We wrap it up with a G chord. We will play 4 measures of G, but it's actually 3 measures of fingerstyle, and then we're going to strum the G chord for the 4th measure and just let that sustain. So here's how section 3 will sound. The next step is to put it all together and see if you can play the complete GCD progression by memory. Not only do you want to memorize it, but you also want to play the arpeggios with clarity and also at a decent tempo. And you can focus on all 3 with the next clip, where we'll provide an example of the complete GCD progression. Now, if you're able to keep up with the previous clip, you pretty much have this lesson down, and you're ready for the next challenge, which will be applying minor chords with fingerstyle technique into minor chord progressions. And I have a separate video on that. But for those of you who are curious about applying A and E chords within the fingerstyle progression, for a bonus, you can practice along with the next clip, which is an A-D-E fingerstyle progression.